in agriculture, we certainly have some problems coming up, and we're going to talk about them just for a minute. We have the good fortune to have the president of American Farm Bureau, a Texas farmer, been president for
This is 14 years.
14 years. When you hear him testify in Washington, when you hear somebody say American Farm Bureau said this is the man that says that. So, and lately he's been talking about the turkey supply, and the cost of a turkey dinner has gone down, and that makes everybody kind of happy. So without any further, I'm going to let Bob take the floor and give a few remarks and talk about whatever he wants to about agriculture, and that's it. Go ahead.
Well, I will talk a little, but then certainly be open to questions. I think that may be more focused into what everybody may have an interest in. But first, let me say that Bill Stamp has been an outstanding leader for American agriculture, because he's been a president for 40 years from Rhode Island, but he has served in various capacities, committees, and I don't know, Bill, I've known you for a long time, and you've just about done it all. And he's always,
Not yet.
well, maybe not, always been willing to work on behalf of agriculture and farmers and ranchers. And we've certainly appreciated that. It was my great pleasure to be here last night while he was honored for his upcoming 40 years of service. And that's special. That doesn't happen around this country very much. As he pointed out, there are a lot of issues. There are national issues, there are state issues. Bill is much more versed on the things that directly affect Rhode Island. But, you know, let me highlight a couple of things that are going on in Washington, D.C. now. And, you know, frankly, some days we look at Washington, D.C. and wonder if anything is really going on other than both sides griping at each other. But the Farm Bill has been a saga, and while many people think about a Farm Bill as, well, this is about the Midwest commodities or the Southern commodities, it is so much more than that. There are many provisions in that Farm Bill that directly affect Northeast farmers and ranchers, whether you're talking about special provisions for the commodities that are grown in this area, whether you're talking about crop insurance pilot programs for those commodities, or provisions in there for that, whether you're talking about labor issues, you know, the list goes on and on. And then conservation programs are a huge part of the Farm Bill. Research is very key. That's key to all of us in agriculture. So the Farm Bill is an important piece of legislation. It's a very large piece of legislation. The politics surrounding the Farm Bill have been very difficult the past 2 years. We now think we're getting close. I thought, and I said this last night, that we were getting closer. As of this morning, I read a report saying that the talks amongst the principals had kind of gone badly now, so I don't know what that means. It's not unusual in a conference committee, but we need to get a Farm Bill finished. One of the key reasons we need to get a Farm Bill finished is that the law reverts back to the old law, and for dairy, that means that after January 1st, without a new Farm Bill or an extension or something, there will be, in essence, turmoil in the dairy markets. You heard about this last year when they were talking about consumers paying over $5 a gallon for milk if these old provisions kick in. So I don't think they're going to let that happen. So we have a window here where hopefully they'll get a Farm Bill completed. There's some other issues that maybe even have more of an impact on this part of the country, but actually for every producer of commodities in the country, and that's the Food Safety Modernization Act. That is a law that was passed almost 3 years ago. They're just now writing the regulations. The intent was to improve food safety. It's hard to argue with the intent of that legislation. The problem is, as in many things in Washington, when you start writing the rules, then you see what the real impacts are going to be. And in this case, there was an attempt to sort of write a one-size-fits-all rule, which will very detrimentally affect small producers, fruit, vegetable producers. Those, like in the Northeast, where you're producing for your local markets. There are, quote, exemptions that are in there, but the way they're structured, they're really not that good. They're going to impact a whole lot more operations than I think any would be intended. And there's issues with trying to analyze what it costs, and those analyses, as you can imagine, by the government have indicated, well, it's really not going to cost that much. And we're asking them to go back and look at that because we believe the compliance costs will be much more extensive. In fact, to the point where a lot of small, especially crop producers, may be put out of business. So we're very concerned about that, but that's in the rulemaking stage right now, and there's a long way to go, and we have filed extensive comments on behalf of farmers and ranchers. So I suspect the rule will be modified. Will it be modified enough to make sense? That remains to be seen. We'll continue to work on that.
But I also want to talk briefly about the specific impact of the Food Safety Modernization Act on Rhode Island. Goodness is fragile. Goodness is fragile. The hard work of Bill Stamp could be undone quickly if those regulations were to go into effect. It could have a devastating impact on our ability to preserve agriculture in Rhode Island. Here's why. Definitions. In Rhode Island, farmers work together. They cooperate. They share things. They're not huge. They're not engaged typically in commodity crops. What they do is be flexible, creative, multifaceted. The Food Safety Modernization Act, on its face, would appear to have exemptions for small operations. That's the way it looks. But the way the definitions work, that opportunity for exemption is pulled away. How is it pulled? Very simply, farm is defined narrowly, and a farm can only handle the things it produces. As soon as you expand beyond what you produce, you're a mixed type facility, and the full weight of the regulations lands on you. So this kind of establishment would become a mixed type facility, wouldn't it? And the full weight of regulations would have to be borne by this operation, notwithstanding the fact that it would be almost cost prohibitive. So, if we look back to the battle in which Bill Stamp began 30 years ago, 40 years ago, the situation was external competition, high cost, and emerging programs of heavy-duty regulation. And the result was Rhode Island lost 80% of its agricultural acreage, didn't it?
And we're losing it.
Yeah, that's what happened during the period 1950s, early 1950s to 1980. 80% of the agricultural land in Rhode Island was converted to other uses. So what do we have right now? We have a situation where there is certainly external competition. We certainly have a situation in Rhode Island where there continue to be high prices for farmers for almost everything. And we have the potential of cost-heavy regulations with very little capacity in our state for technical assistance to help farmers comply. I said fragility, that goodness is fragile. This is an instance of it. And it's a thing that will make people in Rhode Island unhappy, deeply unhappy. Rick was at my work group when we presented a report, Wednesday evening, right? And it showed that most everybody in Rhode Island knows about farmers markets and farm stands, that their favorability rating is extremely high. So people like what farmers are offering. They trust it and they like it. But that affection, that thing that's so wonderful between farmers and their communities, is no defense against the kind of force that we're up against when you have the combination of competition, high cost, and draconian regulations.